Those are hibiscus. I love hibiscus.
Oh my
Look at
god.
my cucumbers.
Oh my god.
Aren't they amazing? And I grow a lot of my favorite tomatoes, which are these. These are eucalyptus. Here's another lettuce I'm letting flower. It's like a romaine. Once you let it flower, it can't really use it, but I like seeing what happens. And this is arugula. This is some kind of like, this is like some kind of a, very bitter. I'm not sure what this is, but it's some kind of vegetable that I let go too long. But I always do it every summer. I always have a garden.
Gorgeous. Aww.
So then I was on Libin Street, and I had this job at this. Bill Cunningham got me my first job at the SoHo News, which was this weekly amazing newspaper. And I was because I didn't want to sell clothes anymore, so Bill got me this job, and it was like at a newspaper, and I was the style editor. I didn't know what I was doing because I was an artist, but I wanted to not sell clothes anymore, so I took the job. And I had to fill 12 pages every week of this newspaper with style, but Bill kept saying, well, you work at Madison, you understand fashion, you like clothes, and you're an artist, and you live in SoHo, so this is the perfect job for you. And Bill made them hire me because I had no experience. I didn't know anything. I was an artist. I was completely wrong for the job, but they hired me. Unbelievable. For like no money. I was working for nothing. But I was so excited because the SoHo News was this amazing newspaper that we lived by. Remember, no computers, no internet, no cell phones. So you would buy this newspaper every Wednesday, and it told you everything to do. That's how you lived. You lived by it. So you went to every party, every concert, everything, every art opening. It told you everything. And we lived by this. It was like the best. And it had style sections. So it was like, but in those days it was all underground fashion. And it was like, we would never go to fashion shows or anything. It was all like young and underground. So I got this job. It was wild. It was fabulous. It was like outrageous. But it was very radical. Like the Sex Pistols were always in the office. I mean, it was like punk, And then one day the owner sold it. And he sold it to someone like Murdoch in London who bought it by mistake. It was like a mistake. And then we all like freaked out, and we started a union, and everybody rebelled, and the people who bought it were so freaked out because they got there at 9 in the morning and no one was there. But so, we were all like punks. And then they just decided to close it because they were, this was a big mistake. So they closed the SoHo News. But meanwhile, SoHo was starting to have restaurants, and I was like, they are so stupid. They don't even understand that they just closed like the most vital newspaper in New York, and it was like in a neighborhood that's coming up, that's exploding and blowing up. I started a paper in my house, and it was started as a poster. David said, let's start another newspaper. Let's start another weekly. Because they're stupid. Like, SoHo's like ripe for a newspaper. So I went to him, I said, if you start a newspaper, you should have style in it, so I'll do it with you if you want. He was like, yeah, good idea, because I said, then we can get ads. So and he was not visual, he was like a writer, like a news guy. He was like an East Village news reporter. Very hip and cool. So we tried to start this thing called paper, and in my house on Libin Street, and like no one would give us any money. It was just like crazy. Like we tried to raise money, no one understood what we wanted to do. And finally we just decided to do this poster, which was how we started paper, a poster. And we each put in $1,000. We never made money, and then it just, when the internet came, like we were really early on the internet. We were like, we did our own website. Like we were excited about the internet because we thought, oh, now we could do a daily newspaper, because paper was monthly, and my partner David always wanted to do the weekly again from the SoHo News. But we were like, oh God, we could just do it daily, and we did it all ourselves. So we had a really good website, and we did this kind of like bulletin board thing. It was before they really had visual browser. My mother was like interesting. I had a like kind of avant-garde mother, and so she lived in suburban New Jersey, but she wanted to live in New York always, but she kind of, it was a long time ago, so she wanted to have a career, but she couldn't. She was like a housewife. My father had a jewelry store in Newark, New Jersey. He was a jeweler. And so my mother just had 2 kids, and she stayed home, like that's what you were supposed to do in those days. But my mother always went to like crafts fair. She always loved art, and she was always like reading. She was like a big like New Yorker reader, New York Times. She did the crossword puzzle every day. It was like she was obsessed with she was kind of like a explorer, Very hip, my mother, even though she lived in New Jersey. She like always wanted to know. Like we would come, it was only like a half hour out of the city, so we would come to like the hot new restaurant. She would always know like where's the new restaurant. She just knew. She was like hip, but because she was like a culture vulture. She loved culture. So every summer, my mother would be like, in high school, she'd be like, okay, she would never let me just take a summer off. She was very kind of like, she was kind of busting my balls a little. So you can either this summer, you have to decide, Kim, what you're doing this summer. You can either work for your father at the jewelry store in Newark, New Jersey, not fun. Or you could go sleep in the desert in Arizona and work for this architect, Paolo Soleri. He's building the city of the future in the middle of the desert. I was kind of like, okay, I'll go to the desert. So Paolo Soleri was this like kook architect who had this foundation nonprofit. He had bought this land north of Phoenix, but he said if you build a whole city in like a number of buildings, he was an artist, and you get like, I think it was like 50,000 people to live in these buildings and make it self-sufficient, make it like solar energy. This is 1969, okay? If you could get everyone to live in this thing, and it would have its own hospital, it would have its own everything, be like self-sufficient, then people don't have to sprawl and ruin the desert. And he was just starting this, and so he didn't have money. And he made these bells. I have the bells on the terrace. If you look on my terrace, there are 3 or 4 bells. Those bells, he would sell the bells, and that's the money he would use to build Arcosanti. They wrote about him in the New Yorker. That's how my mother knew. So we had to go to like Phoenix to his home, and then we met, and he would just use students, and somehow they figured out that you could get credit, college credit, and you didn't get paid, but it was like physical labor. Like I learned how to use a jackhammer, and then they dumped us like at the site, and we built the first building. I built the first building. I met all these it was people who were like interesting, all my age, kind of like either first year of college or right before college, and it was very bonding, and you'd wake up at 5 in the morning, they would wake you up, and you'd go up to the top you slept at the bottom of the mesa. The whole thing was at the top of the mesa. At the bottom of the mesa was like the camp. And that's where they had gardens, they grew organic, it was vegan. I mean, it was like so early for vegan and all that. It was 1969. And now, what happened is like, of course, like the city of the future, it just like never really got built. But a lot of it got built, and Paolo died. But I went there, I remember like maybe 10 years ago, all of a sudden I saw it in a Miu Miu ad, right? And I got a scholarship to go to Cal Arts, and I studied with John Bolasari, so that I got my master's. And I went to Cal Arts in my pickup truck with my dragon on the side. Then I moved to New York. When I got my degree, everyone was supposed to come to New York, get a gallery. John was like, I'll get you a gallery, don't worry, you'll be in a gallery. I was going to be an artist. But then when we came to New York, all the boys got galleries and not one girl got in a gallery. And I was like, punk rock. I was a punk too. And I was like, fuck you, I hate your art world. I think I'm leaving it. I hated the art world. So I was really mad. And also at the same time I was kind of getting in, I had to get a job. So I met Joey, you know Joey Arias, okay. So this is like a sidebar. In California, I had to have a job because they never had any money. I had a job delivering sandwiches, and that's how I met Joey, because he worked in a frame store. And then Joey and I became friends. Joey Arias, he's an outrageous performance artist, had nothing to do with art or Cal Arts or anything, but he was outrageous. He's the one that like taught me about shopping and going thrifting. He took me to the Rose Bowl swap meet. I got into it. I got so into it. So Joey and I moved here together. We had to get jobs. I got a job selling clothes on Madison Avenue because Joey got it for me. Joey got a job at Fiorucci. Then I got a job a few blocks away at the store Betsy Bucchianini that was like this kooky kind of like store owned by a Rockefeller and Betsy Johnson and this third girl. Bill Cunningham was always standing shooting on Madison Avenue because this was like in the Upper East Side and no one looked like that. I dressed crazy. And so Bill went crazy when he saw me and he started shooting me and shooting me and shooting. He kept shooting me. We became friends. And Bill got me my first job, in fact, you know, because I worked at Betsy Bucchianini probably for 2 or 3 years, and my mother was kind of like, started to come down on me, Kim, okay, time to leave, you know, time's up. And then at that point, I started going to Club 57, the mud club I was going to in Club 57. That's where I met Keith Haring, Penny Sharp, Jean-Michel, all those artists. The first art that I actually bought was Keith and Jean-Michel. Keith had a show in the basement of this church, and I bought like 2 drawings. Well, I only could afford 1 drawing, and then I was like, oh my God, and they were $150, and I was like, oh my God, I have to buy one. He's going to be famous. I knew it. I loved his work, Keith. And he was my friend, so I was like, Keith, which one should I buy? I need to buy one. He's like, just come to my studio tomorrow. I have 1,000 drawings at my house. Just come and look at everything. So I went to his studio, which was really near my house, and I ended up spending like 6 hours going through. He must have had 3,000 drawings. I went through and I narrowed it down to 3 drawings that I loved. But I could only pick one. And I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? So I called my mother. I was like, okay, Mom. There's this artist. I knew my mother always said yes to stuff. I was like, there's this artist. I promise he's going to be famous. And I'm at his studio, and I can only afford 1. But I think that you should, I can't decide between 3. And the other 2 are so good that if you buy the other 2, it will be $300 for 2 of them. I will pay you back over the years. I'll pay you back so that I'll buy them. So my mother was like, okay, you know, so she ended up, so I got 3 drawings, and then Keith threw in a 4th one. I had 4 of them. But I bought them, and my mother had those hanging till the day she died in her house. Those are the 2, I love those 2. One is a type of nuclear bomb that had just been developed, which saves buildings but only kills people, and that was an amazing one. And then above it is just the worship of ideas. I love those 2 drawings. And then that's like, I knew there was peppers here, but I hadn't seen that there was an actual jalapeno. And here's another like little cauliflower. Oh my God! See, you get surprises every day.